All right, y'all. Welcome to the show. Got a big show for you guys today. Go a little bit earlier than usual. It's what is it? Just after 10 o'clock here on the East Coast, high atop Jacksonville, Florida. A little bit cooler. A little bit of a cooler Jacksonville, Florida today. Won't be as hot as it was, the last few times we've been doing the show. But anyway, high atop Jacksonville, Florida. I've got a big show for you guys today, as per usual. A lot of things to discuss. We have some camp intel from Florida State. Other camps around the country are starting to pop off or starting to open up. Got some thoughts on what the analog could be for this year, what the comparison for this upcoming college football season could be, and then, of course, we have the team record projection segment, that little series we're doing, wrapping up soon. I think we'll be wrapping up this pretty soon. We'll have Ole Miss on deck, and then we'll touch on the Buccaneers chaos with the situation going on regarding the situation with Baker Mayfield and some other, uh, and also along with Vita Vea as well. Just some chaos going on there with the contracts and stuff. So we'll touch on that. If you are new here, first of all, welcome to the show. We do this show twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Maybe not this early always, but we're doing it early today. Um, but yeah, we do this show twice a week, Tuesday, Thursdays. We didn't do an extra pod last week. I think we're gonna try to do one tomorrow. That's tentative plan. There is do one tomorrow. Didn't do one last week, but it's not always a guarantee we'll do those. But yeah, do the show twice a week. Be sure to follow us on the socials, on Instagram and on Twitter X, and be sure to follow us on the podcast feed. That's the only place you can get the full extra pod when we do those. Okay, that's only on Spotify. You can find it nowhere else. At least the full version. You get the previews and clips on YouTube channel, but one place you can find the full version is on Spotify. Just be sure to go over there because that's where you can find those only. So anyway, with that all the way, the housekeeping stuff, let's go ahead and jump right in skis, okay? Camp Intel, Florida State. They will actually be here in Jacksonville. They'll be here, I believe, starting on Thursday and Friday. I think they arrive tomorrow, so I'll be able to sort of see them and whatnot when they do practice, when they do their practice in the mornings and they start in the morning. So I'll be able to sort of see that. I'm not part of the media technically, so I don't have access to technically go over there, but a little behind the scenes here. So when I go for my runs in the morning, I guess I don't really know why I'm telling you guys this, but it kind of makes sense here in a minute. When I go for my runs in the morning, I literally go past the field where they're going to be practicing at. So it's right along my path, and that's the way I go. So in the mornings, at least this happened last year and the last few years, I've been able to run past and go by the field and see the players coming in. So I'm not watching the entire practice, but I'm kind of there in the background. So anyway, yeah, that's a little fun fact there. So they will be literally down the street from where I'm broadcasting the show from, just going, I believe, in that direction. I believe somewhere out there. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, so they've been practicing for about a week now, and there's been some information we can get. I believe they'll have their first scrimmage this weekend, I think, or I believe that's what the schedule says. But anyway, so yeah, Florida State. What we've been hearing, of course, what happened last year, they were off to a really good start, right? You beat Bama, they're in the top 10, and you losing to Virginia on the road. Okay, like whatever, like that happens sometimes. Then you lose to Pitt, and you lose to Stanford. Just very, very. I'm not gonna say like completely questionable, but just some losses. You go. I mean, there was a whole bunch of instances of the old Bob plays, right? Bounce of ball plays where one bounce of the ball goes differently. Florida State probably wins some of those games and probably goes to a bowl game, right? Comfortably, probably goes to a bowl game. So Florida State, of course, offensively, you lose Gus Malzahn, but you sort of promote from within. So you're not necessarily running anything different from the Malzahn stuff, like the majority of the players you have from last year's team, especially at receiver, didn't change that much. So you're generally going to be running the Malzahn stuff with the Norvell stuff at the same time. So based on what I can tell, Florida State's offense showed more explosiveness during practice, I believe, more than they did during the spring. Ashton Daniels does look more comfortable. Supposedly he'll be the starter, I believe. I don't think it's actually, I think it is official. He'll be the starter. Actually, I totally forgot. They announced that they made it official back in the spring. So Ashton is the starter. So he has been looking um, reasonably comfortable. The wide receivers are making some plays running game, some potential there. There's a bit of mystery who will be the running back there. And then several of the wide receivers, based on what people have seen, have continued to make plays as the offense has been building momentum. Again, they're not running anything more or less different than what they ran last year. Okay, so it's still going to be, even though Malzahn's not there anymore, it's still the Malzahnian in general, right? It's not. I mean, even before Malzahn was hired last year, Norvell was, he's off that coaching tree, so he runs an offense that is very similar to that. So I'm not expecting that much difference there. Now with Ashton Daniels, I think it's like him, Kevin Sperry, kind of battling for that quarterback position. Obviously, Ashton's already won it. Um, Seeing what I saw from him from Auburn last year, and there were the good moments and the bad, sort of the highs and the lows of him. Even though the two games he started last year for Auburn were both losses, both Vanderbilt and the Iron Bowl. So not a whole big you know that in itself probably doesn't attribute confidence. It's probably like, well, I mean, he performed well in these games without Hugh Freeze, right? The Vanderbilt game, he looked fairly competent. The game against Bama in the Iron Bowl, had flashes, but I will also say that the wide receiver talent, at least at what Auburn had last year, now granted you it's changed because Cam Coleman has gone on to Austin, Texas, but the wide receiver talent in general, even looking at Florida State's wide receivers versus Auburn's receivers, even this year, and the Auburn wide receiver core last year and even going into this year, a lot better than what Florida State has this year, right? So you are downgrading that. But again, since they are running the Malzahn stuff, Ashton, dual threat quarterback, so his running ability fits here, right? That should work out, I think, fairly well. Running back situation, we'll see. There's obviously they're established that they have their running back room, but I just don't think there's been a name that's really emerged yet, based on from what I can tell. There are some names out there, but again, it's kind of fuzzy as to who's really going to be that starting running back. So we'll see what the depth charts look like going forward. But uh, so really and truly, to me, with Florida State, it's still going to come down to the offensive line, right? If they can block well, they can whoever's going to start at running back. Really, to me, it really doesn't really matter that much necessarily. It's really going to come down to that offensive line performing pretty well. Okay, like for example, last year, the game against Bama, they being the offensive line, did a very good job. You also saw last year with Tommy, Tommy Castellanos last year, creating plays, running the football, running around. Can Ashton Daniels do that? Can he at least do a version of that? Can the offensive line for Florida State, be competent enough to where they can, instead of having like 2nd and 9 and 2nd and 8 and 2nd and 7, they can have, 2nd and 3, 2nd and 4, things, 2nd down and 5 less off of first down would be doable. I think if they competent offensive line, you can do that, right? And I think again, if they're running the Malzahn system, that's kind of the key here. You have to have a decent enough offensive line. Getting the receivers, I really don't care. I mean, Ashton Daniels, again, supposedly he is getting more comfortable. He's making more or less several downfield throws. Again, in that type of offense, that's not like you know, it's not necessarily the engine that makes that thing go, right? It's kind of the running game has to be, especially with running quarterback. That's sort of the dynamic you need to have work really well. The passing game, it's not really much of a factor here. So if it's good, it's an added bonus. If it's not good, then who really cares at this point, right? Like it's again, it's the Malzahn style of offense. You're kind of the passing concepts are very elementary. They're not really overly amazing. Uh, Again, all really depends on, it's going to be the offensive line being effective. It's going to be just reasonably effective and not like terrible like it was at times last year, and be sort of how it was at the beginning of the year, with the Bama game and early on in the season last year. If they can do that consistently, what I'm trying to say is that they could have, again, with this schedule being it is the ACC, they could have some success. Now, will it be enough to save Mike Norvell's job? I don't know. But again, it's still going to be Ashton Daniels, that offensive line. If they can, if that's the gel, if they can gel together pretty well, with or without the wide receiver core being anything meaningful, then I think they'll be. I guess that should be okay enough. I guess. Um, Now, defensively, it is interesting. Now, the defensive line here is going to be Florida State's strength. That's been kind of the deal here whether it's the Lions or who was it, Mandrill this year. Both of them have stood out consistently, at least throughout the last. Both going back into spring, I think, and then obviously early on. And that's only the strength of this team. If they can at least have the defensive line be a focal point of that side of the football, right? I mean, that was sort of the case last year a little bit. Again, going back to the Bama game, and even towards the end of the season, they were still getting pressure, but grant you, um, it didn't help when the offense was sputtering at times. But again, I just go back to that game against Bama last year, where their defensive line and them getting pressure on the quarterback with Ty Simpson last year for Bama really helped him out. Now, again, it's sort of how it is kind of, Bama is sort of, with Ty Simpson being more, timid at the beginning of last year, and then they themselves having their own issues with the offensive line and certain limitations they early on for some reason. But that's going to have to be your stalwarts there. It's going to have to be the defensive line getting pressure. And I mean, look, the type of quarterbacks you have to face this year. Darian Mensa at Miami, going against guys like Christopher Vizina at Clemson, who's going to be running around a little bit, right? Potentially Keelan Russell or Austin Mack. Now, while yes, Austin Mack is not a true built right guy, he can run around. He's not a statue, at least from what I can tell. So when they face Bama, that's going to be a challenge. That wasn't an issue last year when they faced Ty Simpson. He wasn't a running quarterback. Keelan Russell, especially, and also Austin Mack, they are more or less they can run. And also, Austin Mack is preferably bigger and a lot stronger than even Ty Simpson was. So that is a bit of an issue there. So that's going to have to be, that defensive line, especially again when they're playing these dual threat quarterbacks, is going to have to be kind of, they're have to do a lot of heavy work here. Okay, again, I cannot emphasize that enough. How they're, I mean, look, it sounds like they have guys here that they trust, but again, they're going to be going against uh, teams that are equal to in talent or maybe slightly better than. Whether it's Bama, Miami, obviously those two are way more talented than Florida State in terms of the lines of scrimmage there, and you have Clemson, who, I mean, who really knows there, right? It could be a lot worse, could be a lot better there for Clemson. And who really knows there? I know a lot of folks again are really high on Clemson this year, especially at quarterback, but who knows? But yeah, that's really kind of the breakdown there. Again, we'll get more information about Clemson or about Clemson eventually, but I'm talking about Florida State. We'll get more. There will be more information on them soon. Again, I believe their first scrimmage is, I believe, soon. It won't be too much longer, so we'll be getting more information on Florida State here soon. Again, they will be here in Jacksonville, going on the road, and I know a lot of folks sort of kind of are confused as to why they've been doing that. I think for a few reasons. I think one of the reasons why they're doing that, why they're coming here, is that I believe what Mike has said before in the past is that it's a team building opportunity, right? You're going on the road. It's a place you're not really used to being at. It's a smaller, because they're going to the campus here at UNF, smaller campus. So it's not your typical dorm setup. It's not your typical practice setup. It's outdoor. There's no indoor facility, obviously, because Florida State doesn't have a football program. So it's kind of dynamics that aren't ideal. It's sort of representative of what you'll deal with on the road, right? You're going on the road when you're going to Bama. It's not ideal conditions there, right? The locker room set up there, a broom closet. Same thing with Clemson, probably. Same thing with going to like NC State or Virginia Tech or Georgia Tech, right? It's not, especially with a lot of these guys who are freshmen and younger guys. I think that's a big reason why he's been doing this, is to, again, get these guys used to playing in uncomfortable conditions. Even though, yes, you face that in high school, but from what I can tell, even though I didn't play high school football, I can definitely tell being around. Well, I did sports in high school, but not football. But just being around that atmosphere, knowing that your home conditions at home, you're having access to your training room and your typical environment and whatnot. It's a lot different when you go on the road, right? It's not totally ideal. So that's part of the reason why. And also other circumstances like, giving, UNF money and whatnot. There's probably some other backdoor deals and stuff and publicity and marketing and whatnot that comes with Florida State coming here. And it draws attention too. I mean, they get crowds here. I mean, again, like I mentioned, every time I go for when I've been going, when they've been coming here and whatnot, I go by going on my runs in the mornings when they're here, and there's a lot of like news crews are out here, and a lot of the beat writers and stuff, and UNF personnel are out there watching. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons why, but the main reason is for team building and to get Mike's trying to get these guys used to going on the road, and especially the younger guys in a college environment, and going to places and being in environments that are not conducive and are not typical of what they're used to dealing with, right? So yeah, I've seen a lot of folks really question why they're doing this and why they're coming to UNF, but it is what it is. But hey, luckily for me, as long as I'm here, we'll be able to again starting, I guess, tomorrow, sort of, but really Thursday and Friday is go for my run, going for my run in the morning, and there's Florida State. There they are. They're out there practicing and whatnot on the field. So yeah, very very unique experience there. But doubt I'll be able to film anything. Doubt I'll really be able to do any interviews or whatever. I'm not technically a part of the media, but who knows? Anyway, practice camp intel. A lot more should be coming up pretty soon. Again, a lot of camps are starting to open up. So by Thursday, we should be able to slowly get more info, along with also previewing camps. I believe LSU starting their camp. I believe like Auburn and Texas A&M and Ohio State. A lot of these places are going to be starting soon. I believe TCU and UNC have started camp because they also play week 0 along with Florida State. So camps are opening up, right? So that just tells you again, this season's it's a coming, right? There's a it's here. So it won't be too much longer before we start getting into game predictions and breakdowns and things like that. Speaking of which, as we move on here, we will be doing so we have the team record projection series. We're wrapping up this week. We're doing Ole Miss. I believe we still have Notre Dame we haven't done yet. So we have Ole Miss and Notre Dame. I think that's it. I think we can call it there, right? I mean, obviously we could probably keep on going until week 1, right? We can do a whole bunch of teams, right? But that's probably a good ending off point there. I think that's fine enough. I don't think we've missed anyone that big. I believe the only other team we haven't done yet is I believe Texas Tech, but I think we are kind of running out of time. I don't know. Maybe we'll do both of them Thursday or something. Notre Dame and Texas Tech. Maybe if I haven't done them yet, but definitely Notre Dame is definitely next. So we have Ole Miss today here later in the show here in a little bit. But what I wanted to say is that since we're wrapping up that segment, right? That's done here, and we'll do that again. Next year with I believe as usual we'll start it around either late April or early May. But with that segment ending, that means that we have to do our conference predictions and playoff predictions, right? That's around the corner. So we'll be doing that, I guess, next week. I guess I'm trying to think here. I mean, yeah, we technically could, right? So that could be that could potentially be on the docket there as early as next week, or heck, even Thursday. Who knows? Maybe we'll just we'll move some things around and whatnot. But see, that'll be coming up pretty soon. That should be great. Again, we'll be doing a lot more, lead up to week 1, obviously game breakdowns and stuff like that. So yeah, just a little housekeeping there, even more housekeeping that the team record projection series about to conclude. We'll see it again April or May next year. So there's that. Again, season's gonna be starting here pretty soon. So just a sign of the times. But yeah, again, as we're taking a small break here, I'm gonna get some water here real quick. Keep the whistle wet a little bit, if you will. Again, subscribe to the channel. Be sure to like the streams, like the videos. Subscribe to the podcast feed. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Again, cannot emphasize that enough. And also, just be sure to follow us on the socials, Instagram and on X, Twitter. You can find us over there as well. So I'm gonna get some water real quick here. Then we'll move on to a segment we did last year that I think we'll continue doing this little, I guess, exercise, and we'll come back. We'll come back here in a second. Here, I'll explain what we're doing here for the new viewers. So. Okay. So what is the analog for this college football season? So we did this last year where we did a little exercise where we kind of think as we're entering the season, right? As we're getting, closer and closer to the season starting, what is the analog for this year? What is the comparison to this upcoming season based on preseason stuff and whatnot, and going into the season, whether it's the talent coming in and the players, and we're sort of trying to set the scene a little bit and kind of think what's a season that is comparable to this, right? And I think there's really two seasons, at least in my opinion, that are uh, very similar to I think this year, right? That have both. Well, actually, maybe not two, but really truly, I think it's really one season that really sticks out to me at the very least that has this much returning quarterback production, right? I mean, yeah, Trinidad Champ was back. You have, you know, Arch Manning coming in. You have Julian Santon. You have Byron Brown at Auburn. You have Laura Sellers. You have Cal's quarterback, his name I still not cannot pronounce, right? You have Darian Mensah. Just a whole long list of quarterbacks. John Mateer, right? Um, Rocco Becht and Dante Moore and all, Jenny Mayava, right? Just a larger list, Bryce Underwood, Devon Dampier, right? Just a smorgasbord of returning, Sam Levitt at LSU, right? Just again, a smorgasbord of players returning and, just high level quarterbacks coming in that we have not seen in a very long time. And I think that's probably a good place to start here as to what the analog could be. And we sort of saw this last year, but not to this degree. We have so many guys coming back, so many guys who could have gone to the NFL draft, like Dante Moore. He chose to stay, right? Yes, we did lose Fernando Mendoza. I mean, he's still around. Obviously, he didn't die or anything, but we lost him to the NFL. He's gone, whatnot. But again, we still, CJ Carr, right? So again, just a massive amount of talent. So that got me thinking, okay, so that's the sort of I guess the factor here we're using here, if we're going to look for an analog, what's the similarities here? Right? Like what's a similar analog? Not to mention the way the sport is sort of open right now, kind of like going into 2018, which is the analog I'm thinking of, right? In 2018, the sport was also open. We'll sort of circle back to that. But much like this year, going to 2026, 2018 was a very, very interesting year because it was a massive loaded year for quarterbacks. Let me just pull up and make sure I get all these right here because there's a lot. So we'll kind of go through the names here. So you have, so notable quarterbacks, similar situation here. Kyler Murray at Oklahoma. You have Tua at Alabama this year. Dwayne Haskins, Will Greer, Gardner Minshew at Washington State. Obviously, Will Greer was at West Virginia. Dwayne Haskins, who, for those of you who don't remember, has since passed away. He was there at Ohio State. You also had Trevor Lawrence. I believe this is freshman year, right? You had Jarrett Stidham at Auburn. You had Nick Fitzgerald at Mississippi State, right? So you had Jake Fromm at Georgia. So this year, 2018, much like this year, very loaded at quarterback. I mean, extremely loaded. I believe you also had who was it? Justin Herbert at Oregon as well. Trying to think of anyone else I'm missing. Sam Ehlinger, I believe, was at Texas. So yeah, this year, 2018, I think is the clear comparison to this year in terms of quarterback talent alone. Very, very similar. I mean, heck, Kyler Murray won the Heisman. You have Tua, Heisman finalist. Dwayne Haskins, I believe, was a Heisman finalist. You also had Joe Burrow, and you can forget about him at LSU, right? So that, to me, just based on quarterback talent, returning talent, the analog for this year is indeed 2018. And also, in conjunction with that, you also have the sport being, for the most part, somewhat open, right? A lot of folks probably didn't think that Clemson was going to go to the national title that year. I mean, we can go look at the final, was it the playoff picture? I mean, I guess a lot of folks didn't think Notre Dame was going to be here. A lot of folks probably didn't believe Clemson, even though they ran through the ACC. A lot of folks probably didn't think, okay, they'll be a national title contender this year, maybe the year following, because again, Trevor Lawrence was a freshman, even though a generational talent and whatnot. So even that year was somewhat of an open situation a little bit. You also had some chaos too. You had Ohio State losing to Purdue, right, in that infamous game with the what's his name, Tyler Trent, right, that game. So a lot of chaos. I mean, you just had several weird things going on. I mean, you have like that year of UCF with McKenzie Milton. They were all running that huge winning streak. You also have that year as well. If you don't remember, Northwestern made it to the Big Ten title game. Yes, that was back when they had divisions, or this is when divisions were popular in the sport. So, I mean, yeah, maybe not the the direct comparison with the openness. And granted, yes, the playoff back then was 4 teams only. So, it's kind of really hard to have openness when the playoff field is, narrowed down. But again, there was a lot of chaos. I mean, you had up to a certain point, you had like what Washington was in the mix, the college football playoff. You had Georgia was in the mix at some point, but they didn't make it because they lost to Bama in that SEC championship game. You still had, I believe LSU was in the mix for a little bit. You had West Virginia with Will Greer. So even that year, yes, while it was a 14 playoff, there was still a lot of chaos and whatnot. So yeah, maybe not the best direct comparison from that standpoint, but from a quarterback talent situation, the long laundry list of great quarterbacks, or at least having a lot of notable quarterbacks going into a season. 2018 is very comparable to this year. I mean, extremely similar. Again, you have all these notable names. Again, Dwayne Haskins, you have Kyler Murray, Mackenzie Milton, uh, Tua, Tua at Alabama, Jake Fromm, Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow. Continue going on. Gardner Minshew, Will Greer. So you also have, you know, again, some very, very notable, quarterbacks this year as well. I mean, again, that's, I think who it was, I believe it was Josh Pate, put out a tweet earlier post talking about all the, quarterbacks that are coming into this year. Just a massive laundry list. Again, I think it's very, very similar. I mean, he has it pulled up here. I'll read it off to you. I mean, just think about this. We have CJ Carr, Jaden Mayava, Drew Mestamaker, Archie Manning, Dante Moore, Trinidad Chambliss, Darian Mensa, Byron Brown, Josh Hoover, Bryce Underwood, Devon Dampier, Keelan Russell, Austin Mack, Marcel Reed, John Mateer, Avery Johnson, Damon Williams, Lenore Sellers, Anthony Calandria, Rocco Beck, DJ Lagway. So again, very similar to 2018, just a smorgasbord. Again, list of you know competent and very, very good quarterbacks. And a lot of these guys, all of even some hardcore cultural fans don't even realize that all these guys are still around. They just assume they either left for the NFL or just fell off the face of Europe. No, they're all still here. I mean, you even have Nico, Elam Yava at Tennessee, or was that Tennessee? No, at UCLA. He's still at UCLA. You still have Bear Buckmeyer at BYU. Kevin Jennings over at SMU. Again, very similar to 2018. Maybe not like a massive similar list. And I believe was 2018, was that Josh Allen's final year or whatever? He may have been still at Wyoming, but yeah, again, very similar to this year. 2018 was also a year where you had, again, a very massive list of notable quarterbacks going into that year. Some of them were unknown, right? You have, Joe Burrow probably wasn't a big name yet, but he was a notable transfer. But yeah, I think that's probably the analog. Again, maybe not so much the openness of the sport, the playoff field. Again, different dynamics. With this year and that year, with the 14 playoff back then and now the 12-team playoff. But again, in terms of quarterbacks and talent, that has to be the analog. 2018. Again, very similar. Again, just open with a whole bunch of good quarterbacks. Again, much like 2018, there's a lot of guys probably people forget. Again, Hugh remembers Nick Fitzgerald and Mississippi State. I do. I remember he was, again, maybe not, he wasn't like he didn't go and have a great career in the pros. Obviously, he did not. But as a quarterback in Mississippi State, and I mean, guy still has, I believe, up until this day, I think he still holds like the rushing records or something. He is a quarterback, which is amazing to me. So, yeah, that year is the analog for this year in terms of returning talent at quarterback. Very comparable to this year. So that to me is the analog. Again, not so much other factors. It probably doesn't match up that well. But if there is one thing these 2 years have in common, it's they don't have a lot. They're not lacking quarterback talent. That's for sure. So that to me is the analog. I wonder if other folks would agree with me on that. I'm sure some folks read like, well, there's other years too, like 2008 and whatnot. Sure, that might be true, but I just again I look at 2018 just based on, especially at the top, right? You have so many, quarterbacks who have gone to who are in the NFL right now, starting or have started before. Even going beyond that, just guys who, again, you probably forget even exist, right? Like Nick Fitzgerald and Will Greer, Gardner Minshew, even. So Jake Fromm as well. So yeah, 2018 probably the analog I would definitely use for this year for college football. Again, if you're looking at a year going into this year, going into this upcoming season, I believe that's the one I would have. And I think the clear connection is talent at quarterback, right? And just very, very much so a massive list for both years with really good talent. And that's crazy too, because even back then there was no real. I mean, the transfer portal was there, but it wasn't as popular as it is now, right? But even back then, with no transfer portal, it's just amazing how all these guys are still around and whatnot, or all those guys were there in that same year. So that's just crazy. Anyway, moving right along. Let's see here. Is it team record projection time? So speaking of QB talent, Ole Miss is up next year. Haven't done them yet. I thought we did do them, but I guess we have not. Um, Ole Miss should be, a team that I think a lot of folks should be excited about. I think. Now, is there some questions going into this year? Absolutely. I mean, it's Pete Golding's first time as a full-time head coach. It was the interim last year, but now, grant you, the interim tag was removed very quickly. I don't even think he was an interim coach. I think he was just the head coach going forward. I don't even think you would consider him an interim. But anyway, there's some questions there with Pete Golding, first full year, new staff coming in. Grant you, yes, it's not totally, different than what you had previously. You're still running basically the same offense. Yes, you're bringing in a new offensive coordinator, but how much different is it really going to be? I believe it is John David Baker, who was at I think East Carolina last year, and they run like a very similar veer and shoot stuff. So it's not that much different, right? So offense alone with Pete Golding coming in, I'm not too concerned. So that's me, at least on the surface. This guy's on a way Will Muschamp clone. Which anytime, whenever you have these defensive-minded head coaches, whether it's in the pros or in college, it's one of the first things I always think about is this guy a Muschamp clone? Is this guy, you know, defense only, but offense continue, consistently sucks and is underwhelming? That's no bueno, right? We saw that with Muschamp, obviously. We saw that with Zach Arnett at Mississippi State. So those are two of the most recent examples of, you know, defensive-minded coaches you don't give a shit about the offense, and it's kind of important to have both sides of the football working. So, luckily for Ole Miss, that shouldn't be the problem here. I think Pete Golding, he obviously cares about the offense, so that's good. So if you're an Ole Miss fan, luckily, at least on the surface, you're not getting a Muschamp clone, right? So that's good. So the offense should be fun. Obviously, you have Trinidad Chambliss coming back. You have Kyron Lacey, I believe, back as well. So you have a lot of talent there. I mean, you did lose some talent, but I think it is good you have a majority of the core of the offense still there, right? And like I said, this Ole Miss team in general, definitely reminds me of Auburn in 2014. If you don't remember that team in 2014 for Auburn, at least in terms of leading up into the year, right? Previous year, this was Malzahn's second year. Gus Malzahn's first year at Auburn in 2013. Obviously, they go all the way to the national title. The offense was fantastic, right? His second year, 2014, bring back Nick Marshall. You lose some parts of the offense that are very, very critical. The fullback, Jay Prosh, you lose Trey Mason, you lose some guys on the offensive line. But you were still returning a good majority of the offense, right? It wasn't like the whole entire thing died. There were some things missing. Obviously, a lot of those things ended up hurting them in the back end, but the offense was an issue there last year. The issue was the defense. And that's actually my somewhat biggest concern here is that I just don't know if the defense will be consistently good as it was last year, right? With Pete Golding now taking over full time as the coach, how's it going to be? Because we saw that in the playoff last year, where yes, they obviously they crushed Tulane and they beat Georgia, but there were moments where the defense, even in the regular season, where it wasn't perfect, right? So that's my only little caveat here is the defense going to is it going to fall off now that Pete Golding is the coach now? Is that staff with whole new, well, it's somewhat whole new defensive staff, although it's mainly, well, at least new in their positions, but they've been on the staff for a while. So we'll see. That is a bit of a concern there, right? And not to mention Pete Golding's history, right? Given how a lot of Alabama fans in general, when he was there at Bama, not his time there wasn't looked at very fondly. So that in general, kind of is a small concern there. Will the deep? Well, not a small. It is a concern, not just a small concern. It's just a concern, right? So yeah, I do expect the defense to be. I'm not gonna say the weakest point of the team. Like it's not going to be like the reason why they. Well, I mean, I don't know. I guess yeah, it probably is going to be the weakest point because again, I don't know. I guess it's almost a I have to see it to believe it type thing. I need to see you actually play some of these games and get on the field and see how the defense operates, right? I mean, you're going to be tested pretty early, right? You have Louisville on Sunday night, I think. Yeah, Sunday night in Nashville. Too bad again. This could be a home and away series, but whatever. Um, Shameful. Could have been, this game could have easily been in Louisville, Kentucky, but I don't know. I guess is Louisville's stadium not good enough, I guess, or Vaught Hemingway's not good enough either to host this game. Anyway, so yeah, they get Louisville early, and then they get LSU, Florida. So we will have we're gonna know pretty early how this defense will operate. Given that now Pete Golding is the full-time head coach again, yes, there was the co-defense coordinators. Yes, they are, you know, they're guys who have been on the staff for a little bit, but grant you, they've not been, especially Marcus Woodson, who is again, he's been on the staff for a while. It's just his first season, I believe, as the defensive coordinator, I think, or maybe he wasn't there previously. No, it is his first year. So yeah, again, a lot of new faces there on the defensive side of the football, right? Given that obviously Pete Golding is now the head coach. So again, offense, I'm not too concerned about Trinidad being back. Like that's a plus, right? Even with the new offensive personnel coming in, I don't think there will be any. I don't think it's going to be a massive change. Now, again, is there an avenue where maybe, just maybe, with Trinidad Chambliss that it was working so well because it was Lane Kiffin's offense, right? And Lane was there to sort of help them and coach them and whatnot. And, and again, that's Lane's specialty, right? He's a really good offensive line and good at coaching quarterbacks. With him not being there, is it possible that you see Trinidad regress a little bit? Is it possible that you see him maybe not play at the same level as he was? Because again, he didn't have Lane there for like 90% of the year. That's possible. And it could be. You could. It's not unlikely that you could see him maybe take a step back early on, especially again against that in the game against Louisville, right? You could potentially see some nervousness, some of the butterflies that happen, especially knowing that this is your first time in a major, sample size going into a season where you're not going to have, well, you haven't had, Lane Kiffin be around, right? He hasn't, been there to, wasn't there during the spring. It wasn't, there obviously, and you won't be there obviously during fall camp. He's at LSU now. So I don't know. It's probably very minor. I don't think it's going to be like a major issue, but it is something that if this thing were to really derail offensively, that'll be why. It's just that Lane Kiffin and his coaching, which is so great, that it sort of masked potential some minor issues of Trinidad. But again, the counter argument I would give to that, and I do believe this is probably more or less the truth, is that you did see him operate fairly well without Lane Kiffin in the playoffs. So that's not too much of a concern there. So again, offense, I wouldn't even worry about it if I'm an Ole Miss fan. Defense, still, I would be a little bit concerned about it. So, again, based on who you're playing early on, again, we can talk about the schedule. They play Louisville again, shamefully at a neutral site. They get a G5 team after that. They get LSU. Lane's first time back to Ole Miss as a head coach ever. You have to get after that. You have to go to Florida. That's not going to be easy. That's a potential, slip up game, especially if you win that game and you immediately have to go down to Gainesville to a Florida team that at that point could be desperate for a huge win. And barring what happens with, in the game against Auburn the week before. So that's, that's going to be easy. That's on the road. You've had issues with Florida in the past. Let's see. After that, you go to Vanderbilt. Not too concerned there. Missouri, same thing. I mean, look, you're going against, Ahmad Hardy. Hopefully the defense that day, better make sure your shoes are tied because that's going to be a lot of, that's going to be a very, very heavy run-focused team there. Then you have Texas on the road. You have Auburn at home, which, helps out a little bit with it being at home. You have Georgia. You have Oklahoma on the road. Georgia's at in Oxford, by the way. FCS team, the Mississippi State. So, look, we'll know early on how this defense is going to operate. Again, that's my only real fear here with Ole Miss is the defense. Can it, is it going to be consistent or is it going to be extremely leaky? And given, again, Pete Golding's history, he's had issues containing these high-powered offenses, and he's had to rely, at least he knows that Bama, especially relying on the offense to, carry the majority of the water. So we'll see about that. Again, who knows? Maybe this could go extremely well. And then, look, there's certainly an avenue to where that is likely the case here. and we'll prove that here, or maybe not prove it, but show you here with our what we have for the record projection here. So what we've broken down here again, based on the schedule and based on my feeling here of the offense being, I think it should be fine. And then there's also the issues with the defense. So, or at least worry there with the defense. So let me go ahead and pull up this graphic. Okay, so here is what I'm thinking for Ole Miss. Now, if you're listening on Spotify, um, I guess you're going to have to try to follow along here as much as you can. But yeah, I can just read it off to you, or at least yeah, I'll just read it off to you. You guys can listen. So on YouTube, can obviously look at the graphic here and whatnot. But yeah, Ole Miss best case scenario 10-2. I think that's definitely in the cards here. Again, if the offense, even if the defense is let's just say they're middle of the road, right? If the defense is just that, and the offense can squeeze out just enough out of Trinidad Chambliss and the returning production there, 10-2 is not out of the cards here. Okay. Now, the worst case scenario is 6-6, and again, this combines both. Defense is horrible. Trinidad, she just takes a step back. Given that a lot of changeover with the offensive staff, which again I think it's highly unlikely, but again that is the worst case scenario. 6-6, there is the worst case scenario. Most reasonable, 9-3. So again, I still think we'll miss, even with all the changes they've had to go through, and Lane Kiffin leaving and all that old distraction. I think 9-3 is pretty likely here. I think it's definitely in the cards. Again, my only big concern here is defense. Is it going to be good enough to, especially if Ole Miss gets into a lot of shootouts, which I think they're probably going to, at least in my opinion, then that's where, again, they may not be, I don't know. I guess I could definitely see a situation where they could go 9-3, maybe even 8-4, right? Which may sound disappointing, but again, grant you with Ole Miss's long sample size of history here, going back to probably to what, the 1950s. That's still pretty good. That's a good year for Ole Miss in boost years, right? So again, I think the comparison with Ole Miss this year is definitely Auburn in 2014. We're a very, very similar situation. The offense that year, in terms of being able to score points and whatnot, was not the issue for the majority of the year. The issue was the defense. And my fear is with Ole Miss is that if the defense is so bad, they consistently give up big plays and they're in these really tight shootout type games, that eventually, much like the Auburn team in 2014, the guys on the offense is going to eventually run out. Like, you can't always have one side of whenever you have these teams where one side of the team is so good, but then the other side is just you know atrociously bad, that eventually the other side that's doing very, very well is eventually going to implode on itself, and it's gonna eventually it's gonna run out of gas. Right? It can only keep up its momentum so much, right? And that's my fear before this. Again, if the defense takes a step back and it's, you know, it's giving up like what 30 points per game or whatever, or something crazy like that, which is again not out there a possibility. Then that's where I do fear this thing could, maybe not be, or this season cannot go the way a lot of folks think it may go, especially coming off of a playoff run where you were about, a minute a minute or so away from reaching a national title for the first time in my lifetime, obviously. So yeah, best case for Ole Miss 10-2, worst case 6-6, most reasonable 9-3 for Pete Golding and Ole Miss in his first year. So yeah, I mean, look again. There's reasons to be excited, but there's also reasons to be cautious, right? Again, I just feel like the defense here could be an issue for them. It's not a guarantee it will be, but I just there's just something about this team and that Auburn team in 2014 that are there's a lot of similarities with them. I'm just gonna say that, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's also not necessarily a good thing either. So anyway, moving right along here. We have one more topic here. Yeah, Buccaneers stuff. So as most of you know, I'm a Bucs fan. If you've been watching the channel for a while, I've been a Tampa Bay Bucs fan for well over 10 years. Right, when I moved here to Florida, They had to choose an NFL team, right? Because the place he came from before had no NFL team. So they had to choose one. That was sort of the thing I decided to, or at least that's what I decided to choose when I came down here in terms of cheering for sports teams. And I ended up choosing Tampa. Why? Because where I was living at the time during my high school years was in the Orlando TV market and whatnot. So Orlando has no NFL team, but they're closest to Tampa, so that's in that market area. So we could very easily watch Tampa games every single Sunday. That's why I chose them. It's proximate location, and also Tampa was the most recent team that won the Super Bowl up to that point. That was again, I became a fan in 2014 and 2015. At that point, they were the only team in Florida to recently win a Super Bowl. That was all the way back in early 2000s with John Gruden. Okay, so at least as a Bucs fan, I can say, hey, pull out the old Super Bowl card out of the back pocket there. If anyone asks me, hey, who's your NFL team and whatnot, I'd just be like, oh, Buccaneers. And hey, we're the most recent team in Florida who won a Super Bowl. And that's still true now because they, with obviously when Tom Brady got there in 2020, they won the Super Bowl. Again, I still believe that's one of the best moments in a fan experience, obviously, you can get. I mean, that was incredible to watch. Yes, it wasn't ideal because it was 2020 and you didn't have the full crowds. And that's some of the things folks always bring up. It's like, oh, they didn't get experience, Green Bay when, when there was, over 50,000 fans in the stands. Well, it doesn't really matter. Like, who really cares at that point? It exists. I think either with or without the crowds, I think Tampa would have very easily, maybe not easily, but I think they would have made it to the Super Bowl. I think that path was certainly there to be had, but it happened. Probably one of the greatest moments of my life in terms of in terms of fan related things. I think that's definitely one of the ones that I cherish a whole lot and something I hold very dearly. And it pains me to say that as Tampa has gone through the years since Tom has left, it's gotten. I mean, it's not been bad. It's been more or less stable, steady, I guess. You know, Tobbles has been the coach there for a couple of years now, or not for a number of years now. I think 4 years now. Uh, it's been okay for the most part. They brought in Baker Mayfield. They've done well drafting. It's been something that, Jason Light, the GM there, has done a very good job of doing. So I have a ton of respect for him. So up until this past, after this last season ended the way it did with no playoff appearance, things are pretty much so steady. Even, even last season until, uh, the middle point of the year, Tampa was like one of the best teams in the country in the NFL. They were like the best team in the NFC. They were 5-1 record. They're winning all these close to games, or I think that was what was the week leading up to the Lions game. Like it was after they beat the 49ers for the first time, and as long as I can remember being a fan. So, I mean, up until then, things were going so well. I mean, heck, Tampa was one of the few teams that beat the Super Bowl champs, right? The Seahawks on the road, and that was like a crazy, afternoon game on CBS with Kevin Harlan calling the game. So, yeah, I mean, up until that Lions game last year, things were going fairly well, right? As good as any Bucs fan could imagine post Tom Brady, right? Even the years you know preceding that. I mean, it was steady. It wasn't like after the first Super Bowl with Gruden where things just fell off really quickly. It was you know this was a lot more of a better you know after post Super Bowl era where it was mostly steady. And this last season was the first time since 2019 and first time this decade that Tampa has missed the playoffs. So you know it is what it is. So even that alone, it's like okay, there were still there was still reason for hope, right? You know, fired the OC, you're going to bring a new OC in. You got rid of, the issues that they were plaguing the offense and the calling, the play calling and stuff like that. That were somewhat issues last year, even though I still kind of believe the defense was the biggest issue, which unfortunately that Todd Bowles is head man. So yeah, now we get into where we are now. So you have Mike Evans leave, and I've said this before, and I've said this, to other folks as well. With Mike Evans leaving in free agency and how that went down, with Todd Bowles, again, I've never met him before. He seems like a normal dude, you know, whatnot. And, I don't, hate him personally, but in terms of letting Mike Evans leave and how that ended up going, you lose a lot of respect. Okay, for letting a with an historic receiver, a guy who I think in a lot of ways should have been a Buccaneer for life, could have very easily been Tampa's version of Megatron when he was up in Detroit, and like he was there for the thick of them. And I believe Megatron, yeah, he was there when they went 0-12 or not 0-12, 0-16, right up there in Detroit. So Mike Evans could have easily been our version of that. Here is a Buccaneer for life, been through the bad, been through the good. He very easily retired as a Buccaneer. We have never had this issue of him leaving. So he's left. So yeah, with Todd Bowles, that's on you, buddy. That's on you. Same with Jason Light too. And the Glazers. That's gonna be a stand on your resume. As much as I respect all of them, especially Jason Light, that's the one thing where I'm like, yeah, that's gonna stay on your resume for sure. And with Bucs fans, that's they're not gonna forget that. So that happened, and you get through the summer and whatnot, and everything looked like it was going to be okay. You lose Mike Evans, and I think most Bucs fans are obviously still mad, but you have the season coming up, so it's like, okay, well, you have to move on at some point, and can't just, it just sort of is what it is, and you can, obviously you can still be mad, but season coming up, at least there's still excitement going in with Baker, and hopefully the defense will get a lot better. But then you get what happened last week and week before with Vita Vea and him requesting a trade, and now Baker's upset with the organization because they're, reluctant to give him a contract extension. What I'm trying to say here, what I am trying to sort of warn my fellow Bucs fans is that with all this chaos going on, with losing Mike Evans and the fact that you didn't really do anything meaningful in the coaching cycle going off of last season, where you didn't really bring in a high quality offensive coordinator, or you didn't make a coaching change, where a lot of folks wanted a regime change with Todd Bowles, and I was sort of there with you guys a little bit because it felt like to me that the defense was the issue, not so much the offense. Though you could make the argument for both. So you're going into this year. You have a quarterback who is going to be a free agent. He's obviously vocally not happy, which indicates that he will not be back next year, more than likely. You have your star defensive player in Vita Vea. Obviously now with Lavonte David retiring, he's probably your most well-known defensive player now on that side of the football, right? So you're probably going to lose him to a trade, more than likely. You're going to lose Baker. There's not really a whole lot of energy, I guess, going to this season. There's a lot of, just kind of dread and kind of, all right, let's get this shit over with and move on and fire Todd. I think this is where it's heading. Now, we'll eventually do our record projection and whatnot and break down the schedule and sort of, talk about where I think this is going. But as a preview, even in a division where it's still very winnable. Yes, you have Carolina, who under Dave Canales, who again was Tampa's OC a few years ago, who was really good, I think. You have them on the rise. You have the Falcons, who, they kind of exist. Same thing with the Saints. They're getting, I guess, slightly better under Kellen Moore to a certain extent. This is a division where if things were, stable in Tampa with the Buccaneers, that they could win this division. Okay, like it's a very they are in, unfortunately, the worst division in terms of competitiveness. So Tampa could very easily win this division. They should have won it last year in a lot of ways. It's looking at the way things are going up until a certain point, but especially this year, it's just they should be the favorite. At least they should going into this year should be the favorite to win this division. But again, because of the chaos and because of where the team's going, the lack of energy, it feels like it's going to be more or less a toss-up where it really shouldn't be. So I don't know, man. I just it just really is confusing to see any real at the moment hope. Maybe once we get into the season, they start winning some of these games and whatnot. Look, Week 1's not going to be easy going up to Cincinnati with Joe Burrow. And then, look, they have their own issues too. But, that's still a very talented team, still a quarterback that I fear a whole lot. That can put up a lot of numbers on a Todd Bowles defense that's gotten worse over the last few years. So all I'm trying to say is that a year that you really see this thing falling apart, or at least a scenario where things really do fall apart, is not out of the question. So if it sounds like, I'm bringing in a lot of doom and gloom and whatnot, it's not that I want to. It's just the way I read the situation. It's not very good. So there's that. Buccaneers chaos and whatnot. Look, we've been through it before as fans. 2014 was a terrible year. 2013 was also really bad. 2015, Jameis's first year was, awful. A lot of the seasons under Dirk Koetter were, pathetic. So we've been through this situation before. So who knows? Look, there's again because how easy the division is. There's still a path to where Tampa could win the division and get in the playoffs. But if the energy was there, right, if the bottom was there and everything was more or less stable, I would feel a lot differently. But I can't say I feel that's. I can't really say I feel very confident right now in the direction this is really going. So unfortunately. And that's it for the show. Again, we'll be back on Thursday as per usual. Again, we'll do the extra pod tomorrow. I believe we'll do that, or we'll be doing that. So until then, take care. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, and we'll see you guys